Har jag lite ljud nu? Ja, det har jag. Fantastiskt. Välkomna tillbaka. Hoppas fikan smakar bra. Ytterligare en världsstjärna på plats.
Ja.
Jakob, välkommen. Och han ska ju lära er att automatisera allt.
That's a big word.
Yeah. Välkommen Jakob.
Yo, tack. Hello everyone. I'm gonna take it from here in English. I could speak Danish since I'm from Copenhagen, but probably most of you wouldn't understand half of what I'm saying. Same as when you talk Swedish to me. So my name is Jakob Gottlieb Svendsen. First of all, I want to like to show you that I have my Twitter ready here. So if I touch my phone, it's not because I'm checking unanswered calls. It's just because I have the Twitter open. And let's just introduce myself. I'm a cloud and data center MVP. I've been for 3 years. And I'm part of the TrueSec company. So I work for TrueSec, as you can see up in the corner here. I've been teaching a lot of trainings here at Lab Center and for TrueSec in the US and a lot of different places. I've actually been teaching PowerShell since 2007. So I don't know how many. I don't even have count of it, maybe 50 times, something like that. I'm the co-founder of the PowerShell user group, so I have a lot to do with PowerShell. And normally in my daily work, I'm a consultant, / developer, / trainer, / speaker, / some guy who does what the others don't want to. But yeah, that's my specialty. And today I'm going to talk about Orchestrator, especially a lot about the service management automation part of Orchestrator. And first I would like to ask, how many of you are using the classic graphical Orchestrator? All right. So how many are using SMA, service management automation? Okay, few. What about Azure automation? Is there anybody here? Yeah, okay. It's kind of hard to see, but there was some. So my agenda is pretty simple. I want to introduce you to especially service management automation. I want to talk about what's new in Orchestrator, Classic and SMA. And then I want to show some scenarios which I've thought of. Some of them are from customers and maybe simplified a little bit. Yep. First of all, an introduction. First of all, I'm using the technical preview 5 of Orchestrator, which I installed last week, and tested the new functionality. So everything you see here is available for you to play with when you get home. Actually, some of it also works with the 2012 version, but you'll see that. In Orchestrator, we have 2 different parts of Orchestrator. We have the classic, or we have 2 automation engines. One of them I usually call the classic Orchestrator. The classic Orchestrator was formerly known as Opalis. Was anybody using it when it was called Opalis? Oh, one. That's good. It is actually the first. I tried to find a specific date yesterday, but I found an article from 1998 saying, here's the new system called Opalis Robot, which will automate your environment. So it's been here almost 20 years. It's been built on. Of course, it's not the same code as it was 20 years ago, but it's kind of developed in that sense from nothing and then added on and more. So today we have it called Orchestrator, and it's actually still lagging a bit behind the modern data center because it only runs in 32-bit and it only runs PowerShell in 2.0. How many of you do PowerShell? Yes, that's good. It wasn't the same thing when I asked in 2007. People go, what's that? Everybody knows what it is today at least, and many people use it. So in Orchestrator 2012 R2, the SMA, Service Management Automation part was added. And it's been quite confusing, as you'll see, because it's also connected into what's called Windows Azure Pack, or at least it uses the GUI from Windows Azure Pack as its GUI. It has some advantages because it's based natively on PowerShell. You can run any version of PowerShell in there, at least from 3.0 plus, and the new one also, the latest versions of PowerShell. It also means that sharing and reusing your runbooks is much simpler. I mean, usually you would have PowerShell running somewhere, maybe a PowerShell script running, and it's easier to convert, to move into SMA compared to creating it in the Classic Orchestrator. And that's mainly because the Classic Orchestrator, again, is 32-bit, and it's a PowerShell 2.0, which can be a challenging thing sometimes. The other thing is that since SMA arrived, and also Azure Automation, which I'll also introduce a bit later, new features are still added to SMA. I wouldn't expect many huge features to be added to the Classic Orchestrator because the focus is on the PowerShell-based automation. That's why most of my session will contain stuff about SMA. So, of course, it's part of System Center 2016. The Classic Orchestrator is also part of 2016, so don't be afraid if you're running it. You'll still be supported for years from now. But the SMA, or Service Management Automation, it's an on-premise automation engine. And I've had multiple questions the last few years about, is it on-prem? Because some people are thinking it's a cloud solution. It's not. Even though it uses this part of Windows Azure pack, it's not Azure, it's not cloud. It's 100% on-premise. Everything is PowerShell-based. PowerShell-based runbooks. We don't have any graphical interface to draw a workflow, which some people liked about Orchestrator. But if you do, when you get to complex stuff like very complex workflows, then it can be actually pretty hard to do in the graphical interface. So in that case, the PowerShell-based is better. And just to go back to what Mikael Nyström said about Orchestrator, because of course I'm also a fan of Orchestrator, but moving an AD object using PowerShell is just this single command. And as he said, it took 3 days workshop to learn the runbook, so I'll think maybe I'll do a 1-day course on learning this command. Something like that. But it's usually it doesn't require, since you have so much support in PowerShell today, so many modules you can import and use, it doesn't require many lines of code to actually do what you want. So why not just run it on your machines? I mean, you probably, I don't want to point fingers at anybody, you probably have some scheduled task scripts running around in your environment. Many people have that. Many people also have the problem about actually figure out what was the result, did it fail? There's even problems sometimes about knowing what actually is running at all. I mean, this was made by John. He stopped 3 months ago. We don't know what he did. He probably has some PowerShell scripts running at some servers. I've heard that so many times. So why do we want a centralized system? Yeah, we can put everything in one database. We can make that database a cluster, so it's highly available, so it's more stable. We can execute our PowerShell on multiple servers, so that if one breaks down, it can run on another server. It can load balance, so we can just start jobs, and then it will go to each server, and it will separate it by some algorithm that automatically puts it balanced on all the servers. So that's really nice that we have a highly available system and load balance. One of the next issues that we always have had, or people, including myself, have had in scripting is that when you need to do a script, you might need a service account in there. So either you can start the script using a scheduled task as a specific user, works fine, but what if you need 3 different service accounts in there? We can't start it as 3 different users at the same time. So you might tend to actually write passwords in your scripts, and that is not the best thing. I mean, if the security guys found out about that, well, I know it's perfect TrueSec when they need to do testing of different environments and finding passwords for users. I mean, it's a perfect thing for hackers too. So what we have here is an asset store where we can save all these credentials. So if we need a service account, we save it in the asset store, when we can reuse it whenever we want. So we can actually, by using permissions, make sure that users that only runs the PowerShell are not able to actually get the password. Of course, an admin who can write these runbooks in SMA can still write a runbook that gets the password, exports the password, but any users cannot. So that's a big difference. We can also save what's called variables, which is saving maybe a server name, could be a file share path, or an organizational unit where you want to put your new users in, or any kind of value that you want. We can actually both get them and we can save them in our runbooks or in our PowerShell, so that we can, for instance, also use them for saving when did I last check for new alerts, for instance. If I check every half hour or so, I can then see, okay, get me all the new changes since last time I checked, because I saved the date in one of these variables. We also have what's called connections, and that's kind of a combination between credentials and variables. So any person who makes a PowerShell module can define a connection. So for instance, if you import the SharePoint module, you'll have a SharePoint connection, and it will have the fields that you need to connect to a SharePoint. Again, making our code simpler. And the last thing we have is schedules. We can save schedules, which means we can get it to automatically trigger runbooks at specific times of day, every hour, every second day, for instance, whatever we want. Another really great thing, which I'm going to use in one of my demos, is the integration via web service. So if you have another system, in my case, I'm going to use ServiceNow as a demo. I want to have something happen in ServiceNow, and I want to start a runbook when that happens. Well, I can use the REST web service for that and start it. Another great thing about SMA compared to the classic orchestrator is that the runbooks you write here are the exact same that you can use in Azure Automation, also known as OMS Automation. So if you want to have a backup system that can run your PowerShell when your on-prem is not working, or you need to run it both places, well, you can share the exact same code. You can just copy, paste, or export and import it to the other system. Yep. Before I continue, I just want to show you the architecture of how this system works. As I said, we have this web service that can trigger our runbooks. The web service is, of course, used by the actual portal that we as a user can open and start our runbooks from. So by default, you would use this service management portal, which is part of the Windows Azure Pack. I'll get back to that later. You go in, you start a runbook. It asks the web service, start this runbook. Connected to the web service, we have a data store, a database, where we have everything. There's the runbooks themselves, there's the modules, PowerShell modules that we're going to need, there's the credentials, there's the variables, everything, even the logs for all the executions. So everything is in this one. So when we start one of these jobs, it actually goes to the web service. Web service creates a job in the database, and then we have what's called Runbook Workers, and we can install as many as these as we want to. One of these Runbook Workers will then get the job. Actually, something in the database will actually delegate the job to one of these workers. The worker will pick up the job, and it will start the actual code. If we have a specific PowerShell module that is needed, which we have imported over at our data store here, or database, it will automatically be transferred to the Runbook Worker so that we can use it, so that the Runbook Worker can use it when it executes our code. So this is the advantage that we have all these Runbook Workers, and as I said, we could install 100 if we wanted to. We might not need 100, but we could. Usually we would have 1 or 2 or 3, depending on how how much code you need to, or how much PowerShell you need to run. Yep, but let me show it to you first. So this is my installation, and I'll get back to a bit about how you install later, just so you don't get frightened about this Windows Azure Pack thing. And when I open this portal, which is the Windows Azure Pack client portal, you'll see that there is this automation part here. This is where I have connected my SMA. Here I can see all my jobs that has been running. You can see a nice diagram here, like, if I only want to see the failed ones and the queued ones, failed or suspended ones here, you can see that like that. There you go, 4 failed ones. You can see down here that which jobs are actually the failed ones. So when I start a runbook, I get one of these jobs. If I click one of the runbooks, let's say, for instance, this one called Expand VM Drive, which is for my demo later, I can then go in and see, okay, when did it run? How did it work? Failed a few times, completed a few times. Go into the jobs here, and I can see a bigger list, or I can search for a specific job, as you can see. Go into the job, and I can actually see when it ran, how long it took, what the inputs were, and what the outputs were of the job. So it's a very controlled way to run your PowerShell. And it works in the exact same way as the classic orchestrator, same architecture. It's just based on PowerShell. I can go in here to author, and I can actually see my published version of my runbook. This means that I actually have 2 versions. I have a published version and a draft version. So I can go into the draft version and edit the runbook, and you see I can then type my PowerShell in here. Whoops. When I've made some change to my runbook, I can, instead of just publishing it and replacing the real one, the published one, I can use the test button here to actually test the runbook. It will be run on the server, and I'll see the result. And then I can, if it works, I can then publish it and replace the published version. If a runbook has an input, like this PowerShell has some parameters, like here, when I then run it, I'll be asked for these parameters, as you can see here, and I can then type in whatever. I'll just make one that fails, so I don't mess up anything, like H:. You see, when I started, it creates a job actually, and now it's just a test job, so it's just right here. And you can see it's now actually already executed. And it says, well, I couldn't connect to the computer called no exists, so of course it didn't work. But you can see here it runs really quickly too. In here I have the assets. And for instance, later I'm going to make a small runbook to list the incidents that are in ServiceNow. And for that I need the ServiceNow PowerShell module. So right now I'm going to upload that module. And what I did was just to take the folder where I have my module in PowerShell, zip it into a zip file. Actually, I forgot to turn this on. There we go. Zip it into a zip file, and then I'm able to actually upload the module to SMA, like that. And you'll see that it uploads, and then it spends a little time checking what's in the module, and then it's ready to go in a few seconds. Or a bit more. There we go. So now I have the module in here. I can, for instance, search for it here. Service. Oh, sorry, I need to update the list or wait a little bit. I don't want to wait. There we go. Okay. So this asset store and all this it's really powerful, and because we can save all the stuff we need in here. you see here now, we have the PS Service Now module. And I can see what's in the module here. So when I'm creating a runbook, editing a runbook in here, I can actually use this GUI. Just take this one, for instance, new incident. Go to the draft version. And I can actually go and insert either a setting, which was the assets that I have saved. Could be that I wanted a specific credential, for instance, like here. And you see, it actually inserts the code to get a credential called SESM service account. The credentials are just picked up by a text string, so this means that we can do very flexible things like using the location of the user in the name of the credential to get the actual credential to connect to that location's servers, for instance. We can also insert stuff here from an activity where we have all the modules that are installed. Actually, I only added the ServiceNow module. All the others are built in. And I can then select some kind of, for example, a new ServiceNow incident. And I can then insert this command directly into my runbook here. So we do have some help here if you want to. But let me show you a nicer way in a second to create these runbooks. Last thing before I finish this demo, I just wanted to show you that when you install Orchestrator, there is a lot of examples. So you have examples for Ops Manager, for SQL servers, for Virtual Machine Manager. So you have a nice starting point to get connected and to actually start integrating your systems. Yep. So before I get to the what's new, I just want to show you, I'll talk about a little introduction to Azure Automation. Azure Automation is what they call a hybrid automation engine, which means that the central part of Azure Automation, or the automation service, is in the cloud. But we are able to actually run code from our own servers using what's called the hybrid workers. In Azure Automation, you can run PowerShell script runbooks or PowerShell workflow runbooks. I'll get back to that point in a few minutes. In Azure Automation, you can make them text-based like we can in SMA, but they also have a new offering where we can actually draw them in a graphical interface. And drawing PowerShell in a graphical interface doesn't really work, but if you have multiple runbooks that you already created and you need to put them together in a bigger workflow, then the graphical interface is really nice for that. So you create, for instance, a runbook that can create a user, one that can update an incident, and then you put them together in a graphical interface in the end. Another thing is that since it's a cloud service, we have very easy access into the service from anywhere because it's on the internet. And they have something called the webhooks. So we have very easy integration using these webhooks. So connecting it with SharePoint, with ServiceNow, any system that you have in the cloud, or any system actually, because you can get a small URL for each of the runbooks, and you can just call that URL and the runbook will start. So it has a really nice integration because, I mean, we also have the web service in SMA, which is great to integrate in your own data center. But if you wanted to do it from outside, from the internet, well, if you ask the security guys, hey, can you open up a port from the outside into my runbook server so I can start my runbooks? I'm not sure that it's going to be so happy about that. The thing about cloud service is that you pay for usage. This means that you actually pay for every minute your runbook runs. This means that not when you start the job and it's queued and waiting for a worker to pick up the job, that doesn't cost anything. But when the runbook is running, it costs you a little bit. But as you can see, as I calculated yesterday, 1 Swedish krona is about 1 hour of PowerShell. So it's not that expensive. I mean, about 50,000 minutes is about 800 Swedish kronas or something like that. But if you have something that's running all the time, every hour of the day and night, well, it can catch up with you, and it can cost some more, of course. but because one runbook running every minute, all day, all night, costs you about 24 Swedish kronor a day per runbook. So of course there's a usage for Azure Automation, the cloud version. There's also a really nice usage, use cases for the SMA on-prem version, where you don't pay per minute, but you pay a license for your system center. There's also really nice scenarios where you want to use both, where you might want this to integrate to cloud services, but you want your on-prem to do the rest. Or you can even integrate this and start something on-prem if you want to. Because the design of this hybrid thing is that you have the cloud service, as it says, up here. So any clouds from left and right can go in and start runbooks, or you can connect to them, whatever. It's Microsoft's problem about the firewalls and all the security. And then you have your data center where you can actually install a machine. Actually, it's just the same agent as a SCOM agent. And you enable it as a hybrid worker, which means that when you start something from up in the cloud, you can decide to start it on a hybrid worker, and it will start in your data center, and it will then be able to connect to your on-premise stuff. So these services are very similar. As I said, the text-based runbooks you can copy directly or import, export directly from SMA to Azure Automation, which is also a reason why if you want today to start on automation, I would recommend SMA compared to the classic Orchestrator. Because at some point, even though you might not do it today, you might at some point want to move to cloud solution, and there you have it, then you can move them directly. Let's see what's new, because there is a few. It's not like we have a million new features, because there's not a million new features to add. But there is some really nice features that has been added, that will be added, and is already, some of them almost in the TP, but I can at least show them to you. First of all, Orchestrator Classic. Nothing is announced, no news about any. I would expect some updates. Maybe some of the activities could be updated, or if there's any security issues, of course, they are still updated, but you shouldn't expect any big features there. So let's see what's new in SMA instead. The first thing is support for PowerShell scripts, and this is a really big deal if you ask me. So at lunch, I said that to a guy. I can't see where you're sitting because it's so dark, but then he said, well, I said, before we could only run PowerShell Workflows. And he said, what's a workflow? I said, okay. So the thing is, because everybody says, okay, didn't we always run PowerShell scripts? No, because the old version, or the current version, actually only supports PowerShell Workflows. A workflow still looks like a script, but it's more powerful. It can do some more stuff, like, I actually have a slide about it here. First of all, when you run this workflow, it's actually not running as a script. A PowerShell script will be run line by line, just as if you were typing it into a console. A workflow actually gets converted into an executable based on what's called the Windows Workflow Foundation. And what does that mean? Well, first of all, it means that it's more robust, so it can actually do a few features I'll mention in a second. But second of all, which is the downside, is that it takes some time to do that compilation. So if you start a runbook in SMA 2012 R2, or in SMA 2016 that is based on PowerShell Workflow, it will take 1, 2, 3, 4, 10, 30, up to maybe a few minutes in very huge workflows for it to actually start. And that can be a bit annoying in some cases where you want things to trigger fast. And as you'll see, as you also saw in my demo before, when I triggered the test, you saw the result of the runbook instantly. That's because it's a script runbook. If it was a workflow runbook, it would have been waiting in a starting phase for, that runbook would have taken maybe 10 seconds for it to start, or 15 seconds. I mean, if you are creating a new employee that starts in 2 months, 10 seconds is nothing. I mean, it doesn't really do anything. But if you want to do stuff fast, for instance, alert somebody, or there's a lot of use cases where you want things to happen instantly, well, then the compilation time is a problem, or was a problem. The thing is, they are different. Because they can do some more stuff, they can run things in parallel. Means that if you, for instance, are going through 100 results using what's called a for each, well, you can set a parallel switch on it, and it will handle 50 of the results at the same time. And then when it's done with either of those, it'll go to the next 50 results at the same time. It's not going to do all 100 at the same time, because it has a limit, of course. You can actually set that limit in the PowerShell configuration. Another thing is, this is maybe the most useful part of workflows. It can persist its state and suspend, meaning that if you have a runbook that runs and fails, I'll just take the next one too. If you have a runbook that runs, creates a user, creates an exchange mailbox, for instance, and then the third thing it has to do is to create the file share. Well, the file server was down because somebody had turned it off, or somebody is doing servicing, probably config manager guys rebooting it in the middle of the day or something. I don't know. But it could be down. Another situation which I see so much is maybe 80-90% of all the errors I've seen in automation is service account is locked, or service account has a new password. Or the worst one, somebody put his own account as a service account. Nobody does that. Well, I do sometimes. Anyway, we can put in checkpoints. So if it created the user, we put a checkpoint. If it created the mailbox, we put a checkpoint. Then it gets to the point where it actually creates the folder and it fails. Well, the runbook doesn't fail. It suspends instead. We can then go in and see what error happened. We can figure out, okay, it was because the service account was locked, or the file share was down. We can then fix that problem, and we can then resume from the last checkpoint. It's a very powerful feature in automation that you can resume from specific points in your runbook. So that's the main reason why workflows are more powerful. But they take time. And about using these checkpoints and all that, well, it's not needed in many use cases of automation. Another thing is they can actually be designed to continue when you have rebooted the server. But again, it runs what's called activities. You have to write it in a specific way, this workflows. You cannot run all PowerShell commands in there. If they don't work, you'll have to use the inline script block, which is a block you can put in there, and then put PowerShell in the middle. But in that block, you don't have all the features of checkpoints and parallel and all that stuff. It's kind of like running a remote command, this inline script. Just as an example, you cannot use the pipe. The pipe in PowerShell is the main thing. It's not supported in workflow. You cannot, for instance, run a command that says connect to my server, and then next time, in the next line, run a command saying, okay, get whatever from the server you're connected to. Doesn't work. Session-based connections, as they're called, doesn't work. So workflows were pretty hard. And that's what actually made some people be a bit afraid of starting at SMA. For instance, I had a customer 2 weeks ago saying, we want SMA. And I said, and they said, you also need to do 2 days of workshop and learn us PowerShell. And I said, well, I would like to do the work now, but I think that you should wait to 2016. And then we'll talk after the summer, unless you need it now. Because after the summer, or in Q3, as the official announcement is, System Center 2016 is coming, and then they can run PowerShell scripts. It also means that any scripts you already made, they will work without changes. Starts much faster. Has less features, though. But again, you don't need checkpoints and resume stuff in many situations. When you then download the Technical Preview 5, well, it's not supported from the GUI. You cannot change your runbooks from the portal. But luckily, it's a perfect fit. About the GUI, luckily, another new feature actually helps with that, and you'll see that in a second. Another thing is that when you have multiple runbooks that are PowerShell based, think of them as a folder with a lot of scripts. It is actually a folder with a lot of scripts. So go in and call your scripts just as you were in the same folder, parameter, whatever parameters you need. You just need the dot backslash in front. Of course, you can also use the web service to trigger script runbooks, but if you want to start a workflow runbook, or if you want to start a script runbook from a workflow runbook, you'll have to go through the web service using SMA. Yep. All right. Actually, I did do that already. So we'll just go to the next, which is the next new feature. And I'll show you that in a second, because this is where we can actually edit our PowerShell script runbooks. This is the ISE add-on for PowerShell. Yeah, for PowerShell ISE, of course. And it's my favorite tool, of course. PowerShell ISE is where I've done all my PowerShell since it was released in 2008 R2. It's very similar, this plugin, to the SEO Automation plugin, if you have tried that. What we can do here is to actually edit, create, handle all our runbooks that we have. We can go in, we can edit our assets and all that, but I think I'll go straight to the demo and show you. Whoops, there we go. So in here, I have installed this add-in. So when I start my PowerShell ISE, you'll see that it will load. There we go. And I can then click sign in, and it logs in using my Windows credentials, because that's what I chose. And I can now handle all my runbooks. So any daily work that I do, I can actually go in here and say, okay, I want to, let's say, edit this called script, new script 01. I click download. It says, well, you already have an updated local copy. You can actually see that over here. So it says, do you really want to override your local copy? Well, I actually don't want to do that. Let's take another one, this one. I can do download. Yep, and then I can click open, and now I can actually use and work with my runbook. So for instance, if I want to create a new runbook similar to this one, I'll go in and click create, and we go new TrueSec demo. I'll then am able here to select script or workflow, choose script, and I'll get a runbook created. It's called a name here. So now I need to actually, let's take these two commands here. This is the commands to get the latest incident of my service now. And I just need to make sure one thing. Whoops, wrong connection. This one. Anybody here using ServiceNow? All right, there's some. In Denmark, it's very popular. And if you want to play around with ServiceNow as a consultant, or if you want whatever, you can actually register. And this is what what I wanted to happen. You can actually register at your developer portal, and you get your own free ServiceNow instance where you can do whatever you want. The thing is, every half an hour, if you don't use it, it'll get closed like this, and you have to start it up. And if you don't use it at all for 10 days, it will be deleted. So you have to keep it alive, and you have to or export your changes so you can import it into a new version. But while that starts, I can do the runbook. This is the commands to actually connect to ServiceNow. It needs a URL to my ServiceNow, and it needs a credential. So I want to use the assets for that. And here I have my assets, I have my credentials, I have my variables. So if we start with the URL, I can click here, new, and we can say ServiceNow URL. Type, I select variable, And then I can select if I want it to be a string or a number. I can also select if I want it to be encrypted or not, which means if it's encrypted, I'm not able to see it again unless I use it in a runbook. So any user who goes in and can see these assets are not able to see the content of it. Then we get my URL, which is right here. There we go. Like that. And now it's actually created locally only. I could upload it if I want to, and it will be uploaded to SMA. I don't have to. I can still test it here before I upload everything. Then I need it in my runbook, so I do a URL, $URL equals, and then I can select my value here and click Insert. And you see it actually inserts the code for it. I do the same for credential. So we call it service now. Service account. Credential. And I can write in a credential. And please notice here that this is not a Windows credential. It could be a credential for a Windows machine. It could be a credential for anything that you would need in PowerShell. So this is just just my ServiceNow credential. There we go. And I can then insert that in here. Like that. Now, the problem before we had this plugin was that I had to upload or run my runbook in SMA in the GUI. So I wasn't able to actually pause it by using the debugger, for instance, making a breakpoint, like you see here where we break it like that. The great thing about using this plugin is now we can run it from our own server. So before we couldn't use these commands here because they were only in SMA. But now they are part of the plugin. So if I click F5 on my local server here, it will actually execute my PowerShell. And I forgot to check if my... Oh, yeah. It's actually a good reason here, because what I just did was to upload the PowerShell module for ServiceNow. I didn't install the module myself on the machine I'm working on here. So therefore, it says you cannot run your commands. So one thing that you need to do, of course, if you are running it locally, is to install the actual modules that you need. So I just install that in here, like that. Then we try it again. Maybe I need to restart the editor. Nope, that's fine. It says true, it was connected to my ServiceNow, and now it got the latest incident from my ServiceNow. So instead of having to either rewrite my code without these, so that I would write in credentials and so on, I can just use this plugin. When I'm done, I can then upload my credentials, my assets, go to my runbook, make sure it's saved up here, and you can see it's a local-only runbook. I can then upload draft version to my SMA. I can test it at SMA if I want to. I can also now go to the GUI here. And there you see it actually popped up right in front of my eyes. There we go. And I can actually go in and test it if I want to. It actually set a problem because I didn't publish it, and because these PowerShell scripts modules, they are not completely supported yet. Of course, when the GA, the ITM version arrives, it should be fully supported. So I can go in here and I can start my runbook if I want to. There we go. But I cannot go in. We can just do that while it runs. I cannot go in and actually change my runbook. If I click Edit, oh, I could. I couldn't do that yesterday. So it's always nice when you test something and it doesn't work, and then you try to show it doesn't work, and it works. So I'm not sure. Sometimes you might get an error or two in here, but it actually seems pretty good. And now it ran our runbook. There we go. It actually triggered really quickly. The job is made in a second, and you see it finished in 10 seconds, connected to ServiceNow and so on. So there's no waiting time here. let's go back to this one. Whoop, that's a little error. So there is, oh, I wasn't intentional doing animation there. There is a blog post here that you could go and you could actually download this plugin. This plugin doesn't only work with 2016, it also works if you're using 2012 R2. And all you do to install it is just to run this single command, install module, SMA authoring toolkit, and it will install a PowerShell module on your machine, which is the actual plugin. And if you run this install SMA ISE add-on command, it will actually make sure that it starts every single time you start your editor. But in my case, I don't want that because sometimes I need the Azure Automation plugin, sometimes I need the SMA plugin. So instead, you can skip running the install command, and then when you need the module, you just import, need the plugin, you just import this module, and it appears in your editor. Okay, I see I had a bit. Another new feature, the last one I'll show here, is that you can now specify a specific Runbook Worker for a specific runbook. I'm not sure that this feature is actually complete yet, but what you can do is you can run this PowerShell command, set SMA runbook configuration, name the actual runbook, and then name which worker you want this runbook to run on. So you can designate specific runbooks to run in DMZ worker, for instance, or in a specific department, a specific part of your network. Yep. So these were the three new features. And the last new feature is that there's going to be official support for PowerShell 5.0. I've been running 5.0 PowerShell on a lot of SMA installations in 2012 R2, but there is sometimes a few issues, so they will be gone in the new version. Yep. When you set it up, it's just a part of the Orchestrator installation. But besides this, you need the actual GUI, and it requires the Windows Azure pack. And sometimes people go, oh no, and then they run out of the door. Is that an issue? No. It's a big no, that one. Because when you then the customer goes, or one of you guys goes to TechNet and checks out the installation for Azure Stack, Azure Pack. You see, oh, it's just 32 servers. No big deal, right? This is the distributed, the huge installation of Windows Azure Pack. This is when you want to scale it to hyperscale, to a lot of servers. Then you need all this different, so it's made to actually scale to thousands of servers if you wanted to. This is why they have guides like this. But we don't need all that for our SMA. What we need is a server that is the web service for SMA, has these 5 components of Windows Azure Pack, which is the admin side and the stuff that's needed for the admin side, and then the APIs for the tenant, which the admin portal also uses. You don't need ADFS, you don't need any of the other stuff that's great about Windows Azure Pack, but not needed in this situation. You install it via the web platform installer. You can even choose to install the Express version of Windows Azure Pack, where everything is put on a single server, and you install many more components that I have listed here. If you have a test server, you could put everything in a single server. Windows Azure Pack, Express, SMA, whatever. And if you want to test this out, the TP5, you can, on MSDN at least, download a VHD, which you can start. And it has all the installations for SMA and SQL Server and so on. And you can then install everything on a single box. So it's not that hard. I usually estimate this to 1 day, but that's including an introduction, half-day introduction to the customer of how this thing works. Yep. So a few scenarios. The first one is expand drive. I want to use SCUM in this one. But you have a SCUM that has some alerts, and then you have a runbook that needs to trigger when there's a new alert. Some people would then have a runbook that would run all day check for a specific alert. Has it arrived? Has it arrived? And that's what I said about the Azure automation you pay per minute, for instance. Then this is not a good idea. Since we can easily start runbooks also in SMA, we can use what's called the recovery action instead. So in our scum, well, you can't see the text. In our scum, this alert appears. And in scum, we can then describe a command line that needs to be run when this alert appears. The command line is called the recovery action. Then uses a start SMA runbook commandlet, which starts the runbook and executes the actual runbook. So what I want to do here is to do this. This is my scenario. We have a runbook to help us fix the stuff. We have a client or a server that has, well, it's probably a server, but it's a client in the scum way. An agent that actually has low disk space. Goes to critical state in scum. This critical state triggers the recovery action that I just talked about, which means that my runbook starts. First thing it does is to go to SCVMM and extend the VHD. And then when that's done, well, then we connect directly to the server that has the problem and we extend the partition. So this means that when the disk is full, about 10 seconds later, it will be X number of % bigger. Of course, could be dangerous in a production environment to just expand it all the time until it's 4 terabytes big and everything crashes. But it's still a good example of how automation can help you. So if I go here to my demo 01, and here we have a drive that is 43.9 gigabytes big. And I have a little PowerShell command that will fill the drive with a dummy file until there's 200 megabytes left. I'm sorry about the resolution here. Then we have our logical disk alerts. And you see I've tested it a few times, a few days ago. And in here, if I look at the monitor in scum, we go to Edit Monitor. Here we go. I have these recovery actions. This one was the new one I created a few days ago for SMA TP5. And this action actually triggers a PowerShell command that you can see here called start SMA runbook. Because start SMA runbook, it describes where my web service is, SMA, describes which runbook to start. And then it sends parameters to the runbook, which is one called drive, where it takes the display name of the drive who actually has low disk space. And then a client computer where it takes what's called the host of the actual disk-based problem. Goes into the runbook and it starts right away. So let's try that. And I'll just run this file and then I switch quickly back to SMA so you can see that it starts. Well, maybe we should show you that we have the alert first. Okay, first the drive here. Drive is now 200 megabytes left. And very soon the alert will appear in here. I'll just refresh. There we go. You see the alert. Go to SMA. Go to the runbook. And you see it's already running this runbook because it didn't check every 15 seconds or 1 minute. It triggered by the event of the things happening. It started the runbook straight away. It runs. I think it takes about 30 seconds or so to run. Let's just see the drive here. Still low disk space. It's completed here. And if we look here, still load this space. Oh, sorry about that. I've been using. I think this is the 20th time I run this demo, but sometimes it goes wrong. But I hope you see the idea that we can do anything on events from SCOM. Yep. Oh. So the last scenario that I have is to integrate to ITSM. So what I want to have happen is that when I create a new incident in ServiceNow, ServiceNow starts one of these runbooks and does whatever job. In this case, it's not important what the actual runbook does, but just that you can see that I can easily integrate. So we have these end users here. I forgot to write end users. Then we have ServiceNow, and we have SMA over here. So ServiceNow also has something called a mid server, which is a server you can install in your own data center, and we need that to be able to trigger something in SMA. So the user creates this incident. There's something called a business rule in ServiceNow that says, okay, there is a rule when a new incident is created, we should trigger what's called a REST message, also part of ServiceNow. This REST message is designated to go to the mid server. Then the mid server runs the REST message, and it connects to the SMA web service, and it starts the runbook. Like that. So this means we can have a runbook trigger milliseconds almost, or second maybe, after we created an incident, and we can do whatever we needed to do. Maybe we need to check the incident content, maybe send it to a specific person. Maybe we need to alert somebody about that there's a new incident. Of course, this can work the other way. If there's a new SCOM alert, we want an incident when there's a new SCOM alert. Well, we can then use a runbook to do that and connect to ServiceNow and create the incident. So I go here, and hopefully my ServiceNow has been started. So actually I have it open in here. So this REST message thing is that you put in a URL for your runbook, and you can see this is a URL for a runbook. It has my web service address there with the runbooks, and then it has an ID of the specific runbook that you need to start, and then it has a start in the URL here. So this grid you can easily find by running another either commandlet, or you can you can use get SMA runbook, and you can get the ID here. Then I have my authentication for my for logging on to my actual SMA. And then I have my mid server selected here, which is one of the servers in my data center. In the content here, I can then send a bunch of JSON, as it's called, one with the ID of the incident ID, the first long line. You can see I have inserted the incident right here. And then also the description of the incident here. So this is how I send stuff to my SMA runbook. And of course, on TechNet, there's examples which I copied this from. So if I go to my incidents here, and I think we'll show it like this. Oh. Like that. All right. I'll go to my this one called Process ServiceNow Incident. Create my incident here. Let's give it a little bit more space there. Come on. There we go. You see it has an incident ID, all that. And I here write TrueSec rocks. Oh, maybe I should spell it correctly. Like that. And then I submit it. And as I said, there is this business rule that runs every time you submit. And you can see there it goes. It popped up already. And if I click it, it's probably already done, which is this. And I can then see that it got the information from my incident. And as you can see, when it's these PowerShell runbooks, they run really, really quickly. It starts within a second from, and this triggered the job within a second, and the runbook started yeah, almost within a second, too. Yes. So, just a single slide before I'm finished is that when you do these integrations from ServiceNow, for instance, you can use these REST messages. You can, of course, also use PowerShell, because there is a PowerShell module coming with SMA where you can start runbooks, which I used in the SCOM demo, for instance. If you are running Service Manager, you can buy connectors or create your own, either from GridPro, the Swedish company, or you have the Cyrison too. So they have connectors that work similar way as if you were using the built-in one for Classic Orchestrator. You just need to pay a little to get them. And if you have other ITSM systems, I mean, last year we said we could automate from Service Manager. Now we go to customers and say we can automate your ITSM. I mean, I haven't yet met one single ITSM system which couldn't run a command, a PowerShell, call a web service, something like that. And any one of those choices can be used to integrate these runbooks into your system. Yep. So, I'm not sure we have time for questions. I'm already out of time, I see. But I'll be here the rest of the day. And there's also my email here, and also at the Ask the Experts later. But otherwise, I'll just say thank you for today. And I hope it was useful.
Tusen tack.
Yes.